Hello and welcome to Smartkidz tutorials. In this video, we will be going through the hormonal system in animals. In the previous video, we had studied about the nervous system in animals. So here we will focus on hormonal system in animals, as well as go through the coordination system in plants, as well as the hormonal system in plants. So let's begin first with the hormonal system in animals and see why do we need hormones in the first place when there's a good electrical activity that is going on within our body. So electrical impulses are excellent means for transmission. We know how fast electricity works, but to spread the message over a long distance within a short span of time, it is important to have chemical signals being sent because they travel faster as compared to the electrical impulses. Though, so in certain areas we need electrical impulses or electrical transmission, and in certain areas we need chemical signals to be sent because they are received better. And we also have our cells have receptors to receive these chemical signals. These chemical signals are then decoded and to interpret the message that is received. Okay, and then accordingly action takes place. So impulses reach only those cells that are connected with nervous tissue. So only those which are very close to each other. We have seen in case of the neurons, and the neurons which are closer to each other, only those will receive the message. What about the neurons which are a little bit distant, far away? What about them? By the time the electrical signal receives the message, the importance of the message may be lost, or we may not be able to take action in time. So in that case, that is why chemical signals are important, because the chemical signals, they diffuse. It's like putting a drop of ink in water. What happens then? The drop of ink spreads throughout, and the whole water, which is actually colorless, turns blue within a short span of time. This only happens because of diffusion. So chemical signals work in a similar manner, wherein the message that is received by one neuron, okay, spreads immediately to all the neurons within a fraction of a second, using chemical signals as compared to electrical signals. Within a neuron, electrical signals do pass through. Okay, the conduction of messages happens via electrical impulses, as we know, going through the neuron body. There is something more that we need to know, that when cells conduct these electrical impulses, okay, a tremendous amount of energy is also used up. So cells cannot continuously create and transmit impulse. Okay, the cells need some time. When we exercise or when we run, we need some time to hold our breath. Okay, and then we can continue. So we can't go on like forever running or forever doing work. We need a break. Okay, when we catch a break, we feel better to start all over again, or to continue with the same pace that we stopped at. So similarly, the cells also need a break, and they need some time to once again be at the same position to perform the same amount of work. So cells cannot continuously create and transmit impulse. The cells need some time to reset the mechanism before these can create and generate a new impulse. Okay, and this is a limitation of the cell, and that is why we need these chemical impulses, or what we call hormones. Hormones are these chemical signals that are sending messages to various target organs or target tissues where they are intended to perform certain action. Okay, so due to the limitation, instead of generating electrical impulse, the stimulated cells release a chemical compound called hormone. So we know now why we need hormones instead of electrical impulses, because of this limitation of electrical impulses. Hormones will diffuse to all the cells of the body. That's what I said. They diffuse, means they spread out. The hormones spread out to the intended target tissues or target organs where they are supposed to get certain action done. So the cells then have receptors to detect the hormone and to receive the information and transmit it further if required. So hormones are the chemical messengers which are secreted by the endocrine system into the blood. So all these organs or tissues which secrete these hormones, different types of hormones are there, by the way, and these form what we call part of the endocrine system that secrete various hormones from their respective hormonal glands. So hormonal system in animals, when we speak of, so there are different hormones, okay, and since there are much more, they are broadly categorized over here as thyroxine hormone, growth hormone, sex hormone, and insulin. Major ones that you need to know at your level in class 10. Okay, so we'll go through each one of them one by one, knowing what is the role of thyroxine, growth hormone, sex hormone, and insulin in a body. And it's different in certain cases, like for example the sex hormone is different in males as well and in females. So different hormone is secreted in male and different hormone is secreted in the female, but they are both classified as sex hormones. Okay, let's have a look. So here we have a look. Here is a male body and this is a female body, and more or less they are the same, except if you have a look, the sex hormones would be different in case of this, because males, as we know, we have studied about reproduction, they have got testes, and females have got ovaries. So the ovaries, they secrete female sex hormones, and the testes, they secrete male sex hormone. A male sex hormone would be testosterone and the female sex hormone would be estrogen, and they have different functions obviously to carry out certain things, certain actions that are required for females and certain actions that are required in case of males. Okay, we will not go into the details of each one of them, but just need to know we've got testosterone which is secreted in the testes, okay, and we have estrogen which is secreted from the ovaries. Apart from that, the others are fairly common to each other, but on molecular level they may have a different effect when it comes to males and females. However, at this stage we will just focus on the different hormones and what are their general functions, as in where is their intended organ, from which gland are they released, where are they released from, and what is their basic kind of function. So we'll begin first with the thyroid gland, because we spoke about thyroxine as our first hormone. So thyroid gland is situated somewhere here for both male and female, no difference, and it affects the metabolism, that is the rate at which we break down complex food material into simpler molecules. Okay, how fast or slow. If it is very slow, that makes us sluggish, slow, and even obese. If it is metabolism is very high, that means the breakdown from complex to simpler molecules is very quick, then the individual is usually slim, and no matter how much that person consumes, that person remains slim. Then you may have noticed in certain cases wherein certain people, they tend to eat a lot, but even though they eat a lot, then they do not put on weight, whereas in certain cases you have some people who don't eat so much, okay, compared to what their weight shows or how they look obese. By looking at them you may feel that they are eating quite a lot, but it is quite the contrary, wherein they're not eating so much, but the breakdown is slow, as a result of which, that is their metabolism is slow, as a result of which a lot of fat deposits and they look obese. Okay, so you have the thyroid gland which affects your metabolism. uh, if there is a thyroid gland malfunction, then you may either suffer from hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism, wherein the thyroid functions extra, okay, overreactive, you can say. And in case of hypothyroidism, the thyroid will underperform and will not perform according to the activity that it. Apart from that, thyroxine also affects these secrete adrenaline, and this adrenaline has one function, that is to respond to a particular situation, if we are in danger, okay, then this adrenaline is secreted into our blood, which leads to faster pumping of the heart, as a result of which more supply of blood to all the tissues that are required for escaping, that is running away from there, to the muscle tissues, is provided. By providing this blood, as we know, is a carrier of oxygen. So oxygen is required for these tissues to function at a very, very fast rate. So this adrenaline uh, acts in order to make the heart beat faster, so that more blood is pumped to various tissues. So it is also known as a fight or a flight response gland, wherein when you are angry and you want to fight back, how you say your blood is boiling, how you muster that courage, or you feel a surge within you in order to fight. So that is that, and when you feel that, you may or may have not observed this or noticed it, that your heart begins to pump faster. Same thing happens when you are scared. When you're scared, adrenaline, which has a direct effect on the heart. Even when, in certain cases, this is just for knowledge sake, when um, when a patient's heart stops, and temporarily they have a window wherein they can revive the electrical beating of the heart, and what they do is they give that individual a shot of that chemical, which is epinephrine, okay, and to give it like a jerk, so that it starts beating once again. If it's possible, then yes, it works. Otherwise, the person is declared dead once after a short period of time. Okay, so that is about adrenal glands. Apart from that, you have the pituitary gland, also known as the master gland of the body, because apart from growth and metabolism, it has a direct or indirect effect on the other endocrine glands. By the way, we come across this endocrine system, we spoke about this. So once again, I'll remind you that all these glands which secrete these hormones form a part of the endocrine system. So when somebody speaks about an endocrine system or an endocrinologist, okay, remember they are speaking about this. So people who treat you for diabetes, treat you for thyroid related issues, they are all endocrinologists. It is because they deal with the hormonal system of humans. In this case, we are speaking about pituitary gland, also known as the master gland, and see where the pituitary gland is actually situated. It's in the brain. Okay, this is a gland that is situated in the brain, known as the master gland, and it is responsible for your growth. So it secretes the growth hormone. Okay, and whether you become tall or short is dependent on another hormone that's called a somatotropin, but you don't need to know that. Is controlled by this pituitary gland. Then you have the hypothalamus region, which is over here. Okay, a brain region which controls the pituitary gland. So directly by itself, it does not secrete that hormone, but the hormone is secreted by the pituitary gland. Okay, and hypothalamus is also that region which maintains kind of the temperature, or increases the temperature, you may say, when we are suffering from an infection, that is to kill off the foreign invader or the unwanted microorganism that has infected us. That's when we get fever. Okay. Apart from this, yeah, we have discussed all of them: the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands. Okay, and last we have spoken about the testis and the ovary. The last we come to the pancreas, very, very important, considering the way, considering the disease that we suffer, that is more common compared to any other disease that is being suffered right now around the globe. that is insulin deficiency or resistance to insulin, which leads to diabetes. Diabetes is by far the number one killer in the world, and is also responsible for other defects or other disorders. Most of the people suffer from high blood glucose. That means the sugar in the blood or the glucose in the blood is quite high. Some do suffer from low blood glucose, which is known as hypoglycemia. Most of them suffer from hyperglycemia, which is the quantity of glucose in the blood is much higher. Okay, and much of it owes to our lifestyle, what we consume, how much we consume, and whether we also take a lot of stress. By the way, this adrenal gland is also secretes something called as stress hormone. Okay, that's why we have this fight or a flight response. Okay, so this pancreas actually is supposed to regulate the level of sugar in the blood. Okay, so when it's functioning properly, it secretes the hormone insulin. This insulin maintains a sufficient amount of sugar, that is glucose, in the blood. But for some reason, if it is not functioning properly, then we suffer from something what we call commonly as diabetes. Okay, which many do. Then for that, either we have to take insulin shots, or we have to depend on medications which do the functions of insulin, okay, within our body. So these are all the hormones that we need to know about. So continuing in the same way, we'll look at a feedback mechanism, or in case of this blood sugar, because this is, as I said, is like the number one killer, at least in India, with respect to how many people suffer from it and die from it, diabetes. We'll have a look which will help us to understand why do we have, how do this pancreas function, how does the insulin function, and where it all goes wrong. Let's have a look at it in the next slide. So here we have what we call as a feedback mechanism. It works on the feedback mechanism, the pancreas. Okay, and if you have a look at this, when we consume food, okay, the level of sugar in the blood increases because of breakdown of carbohydrates and so forth. Sugar level in the blood increases. When the sugar level in the blood increases, it is detected by the cells of the pancreas. Okay, they receive the signal, the sugar quantity in the blood has increased. Then what it does is, at that moment, the cells of the pancreas begin synthesizing or making enough of insulin to counter this or to neutralize the excess sugar in the blood. And this they do basically by what they do in this case. If you have a look at the figure down, here there is a person who is probably eating a burger. Okay, so obviously the blood sugar is going to rise. Okay, this is detected by the cells of the pancreas. This is the pancreas. Now once the cells of the pancreas detected, what it does is, this pancreatic cells then start secreting insulin they start pumping insulin into the blood. What does this insulin do? This insulin, basically what they do, they act on the liver. Okay, and once they act on the liver stores converts some of this glucose as glycogen. The rest of the cells which are there, it makes them of the body, makes it permeable, able to receive the sugar into the cell. So the cells, yeah, so there is, as a result of which, part of the glucose has been converted to glycogen, stored as fats, and to be used as energy later on. And part of the sugar, okay, is taken up by the cells which are around. As a result of which, very little of sugar is then floating around, which is harmless to the body. The excess of sugar causes a lot of damage, particularly to the nerves. So by secreting this insulin acts on the liver to get this sugar converted to glycogen and stored over there. On the other hand, this sugar is taken up by cells okay, the remaining part of the sugar. So very less sugar is remaining. So this pancreas will keep secreting this insulin into the blood. Once the insulin level increases into the blood as compared to the sugar, immediately, because the insulin has got no more sugar to act on it, so the level of insulin will rise. Immediately when the level of insulin increases, the blood sugar level falls. This is again detected by the cells of the pancreas, and immediately the cells of the pancreas stop secreting any more insulin. Okay, and in that way, this is what happens. So it stops secreting. So this is like a feedback mechanism. As long as there is sugar in the blood, the pancreas will keep secreting insulin. Once the insulin becomes more than the sugar that is present, or there is no more sugar there in that place, then in that case what happens is the cells of the pancreas receive a message to stop secreting or making any more insulin. Okay, so this is like a feedback mechanism there, and kind of switches off. Okay, as a switch goes off, saying that enough, let's shut shop, no more insulin. That is what it's called a negative feedback loop that happens, and you see it. Then what we say, we achieve homeostasis, which means as it was before the food was consumed, that state is maintained. Moving on to coordination in plants. So we finished with animals, or mostly we're dealing with humans. So we move further to coordination in plants. And plants, we know, do not have a nervous system or muscles to respond to stimulus like humans. Rather, they show two different types of movements in response to the stimulus. One which is dependent on growth, and the other one which is independent of growth. So let's look in the following slides. What do we mean by dependent and independent of growth? So movement that is dependent on growth. Plants respond to stimuli by growing in a particular direction, and because of the directional growth, it appears as if the plant is moving. Okay, so the stimulus is more environmental, and the plant responds in that direction, and it looks like there is movement in that direction. Okay, basically is responding to stimuli within that is there in the environment. So tropical movement, we call it tropical movement, or tropism, is the plant movement that is determined by the direction of an environmental stimulus. And we'll see there are different examples. We have 4 different ones. Tropic movements can be towards the stimulus or can be away from it. Okay. Now we have tropic movements which are of various types depending on the nature of stimulus, and we have 4 of them, and they are phototropism, geotropism, hydrotropism, and chemotropism. And we look into each one of them. Photo means light, geo means land or earth, then hydro means water, and chemo means chemical. So from here you should get a fair knowledge of what we are trying to look into, or the direction of movement that we see. Okay, photo is obviously with respect to sunlight, geo with respect to the land, soil, hydro with respect to water, that is water or any water body, and chemo with respect to chemical impulses. So we'll have a look individually, we'll go through each one of them. So you have phototropism. Here the stimulus is light. You have a look at this. There is probably there's a pot, and there's seedlings over there which are growing, and there's a light which is switched on probably in the night, and everybody is going through the light. During the daytime, this light is switched off, and light, as you know, sunlight is available all around, so it moves straight. But here in this case, light is focused in this area itself, so they are all trying to move towards the bar. So this is by the way taken the what you see over here is in fast forward motion, so you can kind of see it growing, but it's very slow growth, but that's how it grows, moving towards light. It appears that there is movement over there. So shoots respond by bending towards light, while roots respond by bending away from it. So roots don't need light, and they are usually under the soil, so they will move away from the light. that is under the soil. Next is geotropism. Here the stimulus is gravity. So you have a look at this. The leaves, the stem, future stem is growing towards the light, but then you have this roots which are growing more and more. You see this veins like coming out from the roots. Okay, these are the roots, and they are growing towards gravity. Roots of plants grow downwards towards gravity, whereas shoots grow upward against the gravity. Next, you have hydrotropism. In hydrotropism, the stimulus is water. Hydro means water. The roots always tend to grow towards water, as you can see over here. The roots, when there is no water around, it goes straight, but when there is some water available, see how the roots are bending towards water. And lastly, you have chemotropism. In chemotropism, the response is in movement of a chemical stimulus, and this is very well understood with respect to the pollen grain. So you have the pollen grain. The pollen grain will give out a pollen tube, then will move in response, okay, to the chemicals produced by the ovules in the ovary. So it will keep tracking that, and finally it will reach, the tube will reach, so that the male gametes from the pollen grain move towards the ovary and fuse with the ovules for fertilization. That was about movement that was dependent on growth. Here, movement independent of growth. So as no growth is involved, so plants move by changing the shape of the cell. Now this can be done in various ways. In sensitive plants, move its leaves in response to touch, as you can see in case of this touch me not plant. As soon as it is touched, it folds, and then after some time it will revert back to its original state or position. Next, you have the movement takes place at a point different from the point of touch. So action is somewhere else, and the action is felt somewhere else. Okay, then some cells change by changing the amount of water in them. As a result, the cells either shrink or swell, and therefore changes shapes. So this we see in case of a stomata, that we have water is released through the stomata and then it shrinks, and sometimes it takes in water and it swells, and accordingly exchange of gases is also regulated. The hormonal system in plants. So we studied about the hormonal system in animals. Now we come to the hormonal system in plants. So just like animals, there are 4 different types of hormones which are responsible for growth, development, and response to stimulus. So these are auxin, gibberellins, then you have cytokinins and abscisic acid. We'll go through each one of them. First are the auxins. Okay, it's a plant hormone. Yes, that's why we're studying it under plants. Synthesized at the shoot tips over here, and helps the cells grow longer. So helps in elongation of cells, growing of the plant in other words. So when plants detect light, auxins are synthesized, and when light comes from one side of the shoot, auxins diffuse towards the shaded side of the shoot. Concentration of auxin in the shaded side stimulates the cell to grow longer on the shaded side of the shoot, and thus plants appear to bend towards light. So what happens is, these auxins are found at the tips of the shoots, okay, and they are light sensitive, which means that if light falls at a particular angle and there is a particular side which is not receiving sufficient light, then this auxin, okay, these hormones concentrate at that particular end, stimulating growth, okay, on the shaded side, and it appears that as if the light is then bending, the shoot is bending towards the light. Then you have the gibberellins, plant hormones which help in the growth of the stem. So you have a look, this is an example. You have a plant which is small, and the stem has to grow. When the stem grows, then you have the leaves coming out from there, and this is a hormone that stimulates cell growth. Then you have cytokinins, hormones that promote cell division, and concentration is high in fruits and seeds. So this type of hormone is mainly seen where the growth activity is very high. Okay, cell division promotes cell growth. Okay, and when the cell divides, there are more cells formed, more tissues formed, and more organs formed. Okay, so uh, this hormone promotes high growth is what we see, and mostly seen in case of fruits and seeds, which are part of the growth system of plants. So you have a look at this. You have this plant, and then you have this fruits, some fruits which are growing on this plant. Lastly, we have abscisic acid, but unlike auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins, which promote growth, abscisic acid actually stops growth, does the exact opposite, and causes wilting of plants like this, or dying of plants. Not only that, once a fruit becomes mature, okay, then it leads to stopping the growth over there, because the fruit it can't keep growing forever, so it has to stop. Okay, so this abscisic acid also leads to breaking of the fruit from the stem, and it falls down because of this abscisic acid. So basically it stops growth. And even like if you have various plants, they grow up to a certain height, they can't keep growing forever, and there is a limitation there. So this abscisic acid is the limitation, kind of like the stops the growth hormone, like kind of death hormone you can say as well. Okay, and leads to closing of the stomata as well. Okay, so these are the 4 hormones that we see in case of plants. So with this we have completed the chapter of control and coordination. We learnt about the hormonal system in animals as well as that is humans as well as plants. We also learnt about the control and coordination in animals as well as the how things are coordinated in plants. Okay, if you like watching this video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends and classmates. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and keep watching for more such videos. Thank you once again.